We've finally reached the conclusion of the story involving the 3 Chinese astronauts who became stranded in space. So today, we're closing things out by addressing the last big questions: what actually happened to their spacecraft? Are they returning home safely? And most importantly, what comes next? First, for anyone who hasn't been following, here's a quick recap. After the Shenzhou-21 crew arrived at China's Tiangong Space Station on November 1st, the Shenzhou-20 team, Commander Chen Dong, Operator Chen Zhongrui, and Science Operator Wang Jie, helped the newcomers get settled into microgravity. On November 4th, they officially handed over operations of the station to the new arrivals. With that transition complete, the Shenzhou-20 crew was expected to head home the next day on November 5th. However, on the morning of their planned return, the China Manned Space Agency, CMSA, announced that the trip home would be delayed. Their statement read, "The Shenzhou-20 manned spacecraft is suspected of being struck by a small piece of space debris, and impact analysis and risk assessment are underway. To ensure the safety of the taikonauts and the successful completion of the mission, it has been decided that the return mission of Shenzhou-20, originally scheduled for November 5th, will be postponed. Since then, Chen, and Wang have remained aboard Tiangong with a lighter workload, fewer experiments and reduced maintenance tasks compared to the months following their April launch. With both crews now on board, Tiangong's life support systems remain fully capable of supporting 6 people for several weeks, bolstered by supplies from the Tianzhou-9 cargo craft and the recent Shenzhou-21 mission. After 6 days of silence, we finally got an update. On November 11th, CMSA released a new statement on the crew's status. Following the postponement of the Shenzhou-20 return mission, the project team, operating under the principles of life first, safety first, immediately activated emergency protocols. They carried out comprehensive simulation analyses, testing, and safety assessments of the Shenzhou-20 spacecraft, reviewed return plans for the crew, and ensured all systems followed strict procedures for testing and joint debugging. Critical product status evaluations and quality inspections were also completed. Meanwhile, the landing site began full-scale return rehearsals for the Shenzhou-20 crew. CMSA reported that all tasks were progressing steadily and on schedule. They also emphasized that the Tiangong complex remained fully operational and capable of sustaining both crews in orbit. The Shenzhou-20 astronauts were described as healthy, continuing daily activities, and conducting joint science operations with the Shenzhou-21 crew. CMSA did not reveal exactly what failed or where until now. According to state-run Xinhua, the Shenzhou-20 spacecraft does not meet the safety requirements for crew return and will remain in orbit to continue relevant experiments. They reported that tiny cracks were discovered in the re-entry capsule's viewport window, likely caused by a space debris impact. Shenzhou is built in 3 sections: the forward orbital module, the central re-entry capsule, and the service module at the rear. Only the re-entry capsule survives the plunge back to Earth, which is why this damage is so serious. It's the only part that returns, and re-entry is brutally intense. The capsule's design is already a careful compromise. It must be spacious enough for the crew, but also shaped to maintain aerodynamic stability as it screams back through Earth's atmosphere. Its windows face some of the harshest conditions in space. Each pane is made from about 80 specially engineered quartz glass components produced in Jinhuangdao in northern China's Hebei province. These pieces undergo dozens of manufacturing steps before they're ready for spaceflight. They must withstand temperatures up to 1,000 degrees Celsius, extreme thermal swings, intense radiation, and still transmit over 95% of visible light. So the fact that something hit the capsule hard enough to crack that glass shows just how dangerous orbital debris has become. And this isn't rare. Millions of pieces of debris from old satellites, rocket stages, and past collisions surround the Earth. Each breakup event creates clouds of fragments, each fragment following a unique orbit. Here's the frightening part. You'd never see one of these projectiles coming. Relative to a spacecraft, even tiny debris hits at roughly 10 times the speed of a bullet, and many fragments are bullet-sized or smaller. At these speeds, collisions don't look like crashes, they look like explosions. The objects pass through one another so fast that their internal shock waves can't propagate in time, causing them to shatter into countless pieces. Very quickly, thousands of fragments end up on new trajectories, spreading out like an expanding explosion. So naturally, Western space fans began calling for SpaceX to attempt a rescue. It wouldn't be the first time the idea came up. Earlier this year, former U.S. President Donald Trump urged Elon Musk to go get the stranded Boeing Starliner crew he claimed had been abandoned. Musk leaned into the joke, and that mission ended with Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams returning home aboard a SpaceX Crew Dragon in March 2025. A similar scenario occurred in 2022 when a Soyuz craft at the ISS was damaged by a micrometeoroid. Russia launched an uncrewed replacement, but NASA briefly considered SpaceX backup options. Could SpaceX technically swoop in and rescue China's taikonauts too? Well, not exactly. The next Crew Dragon launch isn't scheduled until around March or April 2026 for NASA's Crew 12 mission to the ISS, followed by another flight in June 2026 for Vast's private space station. One of those missions would need to be delayed or repurposed to free up a spacecraft. SpaceX doesn't keep rescue-ready Dragons fueled and waiting on the pad. Then there's the docking issue. Despite rumors that China copied the ISS/SpaceX docking system, the truth is more complex. While international docking standards exist, China's hardware implementation is almost certainly not compatible with Crew Dragon. What about a spacewalk transfer? In 2024, SpaceX proved EVA capability when Jared Isaacman exited Crew Dragon through the nose hatch. But China's launch suits aren't EVA rated, and although Tiangong carries Phaeton EVA suits, they aren't designed to interface with SpaceX equipment and likely wouldn't fit through Dragon's hatch anyway. At the end of the day, China completed a full technical review. Spacecraft have multiple layers of protection, so a cracked window isn't an automatic death sentence structurally, but it's a big unknown. During re-entry, high pressure and extreme temperatures could cause the crack to spread, and that's not the kind of risk anyone wants to test. Even if the window failed completely, backups exist to protect the crew, but relying on backup systems is never ideal. So the safest decision was obvious. Bring the crew home using a different spacecraft, and that's exactly what China did. The 3 astronauts from the Shenzhou-20 mission departed Tiangong and headed home aboard the Shenzhou-21 spacecraft over roughly 6 hours. Shenzhou-21 undocked from the Tianhe module's forward port at 11:14 a.m. China Standard Time, 0314 UTC, then maneuvered to a safe return distance. First, it jettisoned the orbital module. Next, the service module executed the deorbit burn for the re-entry capsule, and then separated. A key design feature allows Shenzhou to use a single parachute plus a braking rocket for touchdown. The heat shield is dropped before landing, similar to the Mercury program's landing bag technique. The capsule deployed its red-white striped parachute and touched down in the late afternoon in the Gobi Desert, about 5.5 hours after departing the station. Just like the Apollo Command Module, the Shenzhou re-entry capsule is not reusable. Each spacecraft flies only once before being discarded. Commander Chen Dong, Chen Zhongrui, and Wang Jie were safely extracted from the capsule after landing and appeared in good condition. Following a smooth parachute-assisted descent, they touched down at the Dongfeng landing site in Inner Mongolia shortly before 3:45 a.m. EST 0845 GMT on November 14th, after spending more than 6 months in low Earth orbit aboard Tiangong. Minutes after landing, recovery teams arrived, helped each crew member exit the spacecraft, and retrieve the experiments they brought home. With this mission, Chen Dong has now accumulated a national record of 418 days in space across 3 flights. Wang Jie and Chen Zhongrui each logged 204 days, during their first missions. Now that they're back on Earth, the 3 taikonauts will undergo standard medical evaluations before traveling to Beijing for more extensive post-mission checks and rehabilitation to readjust to gravity. But this entire event has created an awkward situation aboard Tiangong. The 3 astronauts who launched on Shenzhou-21, Jiang Lu, Wu Yangzhu, and Zhang Hongyang, are still on board the nearly 100-ton station with only the damaged Shenzhou-20 as their ride home. According to Yang Yuguang, chairman of the Space Transportation Committee at the International Astronautical Federation, China always keeps a backup spacecraft and a backup launch vehicle ready for emergencies. That's why the Shenzhou-22 mission is now critical. Even though the spacecraft and its Long March 2F rocket aren't fully assembled, they're already staged in the vehicle assembly building. Typically, China operates under 2 preparation timelines, either about 8.5 days or roughly 16 days, during which engineers complete all necessary tests and inspections for both the spacecraft and the rocket. These systems include hundreds of subsystems that must pass strict checks to guarantee mission success. It's a heavy lift, Yang says, but one China has rehearsed many times. He expects Shenzhou-22 to be launch-ready within several days, and realistically, that's China's only viable option. One major complication is docking space. Tiangong's Tianhe core module has 3 docking ports, one forward, one aft, and one on the nadir bottom. All 3 are currently occupied by Shenzhou-20, Shenzhou-21, and the Tianzhou-9 cargo ship. That means there's no available port for a new spacecraft to dock. The best solution is exactly what China executed. Bring the Shenzhou-20 crew home using the fully functional Shenzhou-21 vehicle. That decision frees up the forward port so Shenzhou-22 can launch a few days later and dock there, as CMSA has already announced. Yang explained that Shenzhou-22, along with the Long March 2 FY-22 rocket, will launch in a crew-ready configuration, but without astronauts on board. It will dock at the front port of the Tianhe module and remain there for about 6 months. Then, the Shenzhou-21 crew will use this newly docked spacecraft for their return to Earth. After that, operations return to their normal rhythm. The original Shenzhou-22 crew will become the Shenzhou-23 crew and will fly to Tiangong about 6 months later aboard the Shenzhou-23 spacecraft. Meanwhile, once Shenzhou-22 is launched, China will accelerate the production and preparation of the Shenzhou-23 vehicle and its Long March 2F launcher. This incident, coming less than a year after SpaceX rescued Boeing's Starliner crew, highlights 2 major challenges in modern human spaceflight. First, the world desperately needs standardized systems that allow for cross-agency or even cross-nation rescue capabilities. Second, the space debris crisis can't be ignored any longer. In both recent incidents, astronauts had a space station to use as a safe haven while mission planners sorted out solutions. But commercial free-flyer missions don't have that luxury. Those crews rely on limited supplies, and if something goes wrong, help must arrive fast. That's why discussions about creating a dedicated space rescue capability are gaining momentum, something flexible enough to use spacecraft like SpaceX's Crew Dragon or any compatible vehicle to respond quickly in emergencies. Ultimately, it all comes down to this. We need a better way to manage space debris. The International Space Station uses what are called Whipple shields for protection. Most of these multi-layer shields can withstand particles up to around 3 millimeters in size. The design is clever. The first layer shatters an incoming object. The next layer breaks the fragments down even further, and by the time anything reaches the final layer, it's too tiny to cause serious damage. But even this system has limits. To stop larger debris, you'd need thicker, heavier shielding with more distance between each layer, and eventually, that adds too much mass to launch practically. That's why no spacecraft, not even the ISS, can be fully protected from every piece of debris that's too small to track but still large enough to be dangerous. This is where global tracking networks come in. The U.S. Space Surveillance Network, SSN, run by the U.S. Air Force, uses radar and optical sensors around the world to track objects in orbit. It can monitor anything roughly softball-sized or larger in low Earth orbit, and anything about basketball-sized out at geosynchronous orbit. With this data, SSN can predict close approaches, possible collisions, and upcoming re-entries. China and other nations run their own tracking systems as well, contributing to a broader international effort to keep space safe. Some radar systems can detect extremely small objects passing through their beams, but not long enough to calculate their orbits. Because of that, scientists estimate the population of tiny debris by counting these brief radar hits and extrapolating from the data. But that's the limit. Small debris remains one of the hardest threats to track. We also have no control over inactive objects, and we can't do anything about active satellites that can't maneuver, like the Hubble Space Telescope. Even when a satellite can maneuver, it's not as simple as telling an airplane to turn left. Orbital mechanics require time, fuel, and advance warning to adjust a satellite's path. There's no easy or cheap fix for the space debris crisis. Cleaning it up would take years and cost a fortune. The largest objects, like dead satellites and spent rocket stages, pose the greatest risk because they can generate even more debris, yet they're also the hardest to move. Meanwhile, smaller fragments are everywhere, still dangerous, and nearly impossible to detect individually. Still, if humanity wants to expand its presence in orbit and beyond, we must solve this problem. So how do we actually clean up all this debris? One idea comes from SpaceX. Back in 2021, Elon Musk suggested using Starship to literally collect orbital junk. He even joked on X, "We can fly Starship around space and chomp up debris with the moving fairing door." Here's how that could work. According to the Starship user guide, the vehicle's payload fairing, the massive clamshell that holds cargo, can open and close in orbit. Normally this is used to deploy satellites, but in a debris cleanup mode, Starship could open its fairing, glide through clusters of large debris, and use its forward momentum to scoop them inside before closing up again. It's essentially the same feeding strategy used by humpback and blue whales. Swim through a swarm, mouth open, then clamp down once enough material is inside. With an internal volume of around 1,100 cubic meters, Starship's fairing could hold an enormous amount of debris, even objects up to 8 times the size of a Crew Dragon capsule, trunk included. The concept of a Pac-Man-style Starship cleaning orbit is undeniably cool, but it's still conceptual and comes with big challenges. It could work for larger pieces of junk, like defunct satellites or broken rocket bodies, but trying to collect thousands of tiny pieces likely wouldn't be worth the cost of a full Starship mission. Plus, small fragments are extremely hard to track accurately, so Starship would struggle to intercept them at all. So what do you think about this idea? If SpaceX started cleaning up orbit tomorrow, they'd inevitably be collecting junk launched by other nations or even entire governments. It's hard to imagine countries like Russia or China being okay with Elon Musk scooping up their defunct satellites and hauling them back to Earth, no matter how helpful it might be. Even so, the idea highlights something important. As more nations, companies, and private missions head into orbit, the need for active debris removal is only going to grow. Whether it's Starship or some other system, the world is going to need a scalable way to clean up space before collisions become even more frequent or catastrophic. Right now, every space agency is focused on mitigation, designing satellites to deorbit at the end of their lives, adding shielding, improving tracking systems, and adjusting orbits to prevent collisions. But mitigation alone won't solve the crisis. The debris that's already up there, millions of pieces of it, won't simply disappear. And with every collision creating new fragments, the situation can snowball into what scientists call the Kessler syndrome, a chain reaction of impacts that could make sections of orbit unusable. That's why the Shenzhou-20 incident matters so much. It's not just a story about cracks in a spacecraft window. It's a warning about the future of human spaceflight, reminder that even small fragments of space junk can jeopardize missions, delay returns, risk lives, and force entire agencies to reshuffle launch plans. If we want a future with lunar bases, Martian habitats, and commercial space stations, a future where thousands of people live and work in space, then cleaning up Earth orbit must become a priority. The technology exists. The need is clear. What's missing now is a coordinated global effort to actually do it. Until then, every mission, whether it's NASA, SpaceX, China, Russia, or any private company, continues to operate in a shooting gallery of invisible threats, and stories like this one are likely to repeat.